Hello, everybody. It is 3:30, and it is time for one of our afternoon STEM shows here at the Headwaters Science Center. This one's kind of a unscheduled one, kind of an impromptu one. Typically, we've dialed back our number of shows lately to we normally are doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday ones, and then usually one or two on the weekends too. But today is a Thursday, of course, which is not one of our typical days. But I, in my personal life, happened to encounter an issue that I thought might be kind of a fun one to do a show with, especially because, I don't know, I've done a handful of these computer shows here, but it's been a while, so might be time to crack open a computer again and see what's going on inside. And I thought it was particularly pertinent to the books that Lee read yesterday, so it's kind of a bunch of different things that all kind of came together at one time. So one of the books that Lee read yesterday was called Inventions and Inventors, and it was kind of this big timeline of kind of prominent inventions over time. And one of the ones that I thought was kind of interesting that like wasn't featured in it is like a really early computer. And so depending on who you talk to, computers kind of get invented in like the late 1930s, early 1940s. The person who you'll commonly see cited as being like sort of the quote-unquote inventor of the computer is this guy named Alan Turing, who is a British man. And basically he invented this machine called a Turing, that's typically called a Turing machine these days, for the sake of breaking codes during World War II. He based it on an earlier like Polish machine that was very similar, and a guy you've never heard of because can talk about that in a different video probably. But they said there is an extended history of computers going back a lot longer than a lot of people kind of expect, because we say 1940 is when the Turing machine kind of becomes a thing. Bomba is the code name for the original one that was made specifically for breaking the German Enigma code. But so that puts it back here around the same time as the same color TV is coming out. But in our book here, the computer that shows up is in 1977, and that's because 1977 is the first like mass-produced, kind of widely distributed personal computer called the Apple II. But as I'm sure you can imagine, it's called the Apple II because there was an Apple I that predates that, just didn't really get much distribution. So the quote-unquote invention here is interesting because it's something that, for the most part got invented decades and decades prior, but didn't really start seeing common use among American households until, the late 70s, early 80s is basically when you start seeing PCs become a thing, like what I have in front of me here. And so what I have here is a computer that has been, like I said, in a number of shows. This is one that I keep around the Science Center, just sort of partially assembled because I mainly use it to test out stuff when stuff is going wrong. It's one that has a bunch of components in it that I know for sure work. And so I can use it, like I said, to test stuff, to figure out what's broken sometimes if we are having computer problems. And like I said, today is a day when we're actually testing something that is like a personal thing of mine, which is I have a hard drive that has been giving me trouble. And so basically what I'm going to go through is sort of a real basic troubleshooting process that I might use when I'm like trying to parse out what a problem is. I did some of this already yesterday when I was having trouble with this at home with this computer yesterday evening. But I'm going to go through sort of what my process is when like I have a computer that doesn't work. And so, with no further ado, why don't we push the power button on our computer here. So it's up on the front. And assuming, wouldn't that be great if like all of a sudden I push the button and everything just works great. We see my desktop that I have in my home computer at home. Wouldn't that be great? But I don't expect we're going to see that. So, honestly, that's even less than I thought we were going to see. And so, basically what we're seeing there is no power even happened. Like, typically what should be happening is that fan should be going. There should be fans happening in here. I know that there is power going because the thing I'm streaming on right now plugged into the same power strip as what this stuff is on. So I know like my power strip is on, but what I bet, classic problem. It's probably happened every single one of these computer streams I've had at some point is I've forgotten to flip the power supply on, because typically this block up here is the power supply, and that switch I just flipped was the power switch for that. And so anytime I'm like working in the guts of a computer, I usually turn the power supply off for safety purposes. And as you see, I frequently forget to turn it back on. So now let's push a button, and hopefully some fans are going to start going right away. Yep, okay. And now, assuming everything is working, we should see on our monitor over here a Windows logo would be great, but I suspect we're not going to see that. We're probably going to see an MSI logo, and then we're probably going to go into BIOS, right? It's going to be a blue screen.
Yeah.
And so, what we're looking at here, which I don't know how well this is going to come across onto the camera, but this is called BIOS. This is an acronym that stands for the Basic Input Output System, I think is the S. Basic Input Output is the BIO, I think the S is System. And what we are notably seeing here is a couple things of note. Our system date and time are correct, which means that our motherboard seemingly is working correctly. And our battery here is also working correctly, is what that means. The next thing that you're seeing on there, though, is that it says SATA port 1, not present, SATA port 2, not present, 3, not present, 4, not present. What that tells us is that my hard drive is not being detected, because right now that hard drive is plugged into SATA port 1. So if the hard drive was being detected, it would say SATA port 1, and then in this where it says not present, it would say like crucial MX500 or whatever the model number is for that hard drive. And so, like I said, now we have a problem. Now I have to do some troubleshooting to figure out exactly what's the problem here. Is it an issue that is happening before we even get to our hard drive, or is it a problem with my hard drive? And so this is where troubleshooting comes in. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this down, and I'm going to test out a couple things, which I'm going to be testing them out one at a time, because one of the things that you always want to be doing when you're troubleshooting, and this really holds for any sort of scientific experiment, you don't want to be trying to test multiple variables at the same time, because if you document a change, you don't know which thing caused the change, basically. And so what I'm going to test first is, maybe there's a chance that our power supply is like not properly sending power to our hard drive. And so, we can document all the things that are wrong here, actually, even. I got markers behind me. So we know that we're getting power to the motherboard because we saw that. And so it's not that, but we could have a problem with not that one. Could be a problem with the hard drive. It could be a problem with the SATA port, which is the port that the hard drive plugs into. It could be a problem with the SATA cable, which is the cable that attaches the port to the hard drive. It could be a problem with our power cable, because that hard drive needs its own separate power off of the power supply, so that cable could be bad. Or it could be a problem with that particular port on the power supply. So, those are the things that we got to test. And generally, what you want to do is you want to be basically figuring out what is... You want to work from beginning to end. You want to work upstream. And so, like I said, the first thing you always want to be testing is generally power stuff. You want to make sure it's actually getting power. And so what I am actually going to do for that is I am going to try swapping in a different hard drive here. And this, I guess, technically is going to be testing for probably a couple things. Because if this one just works, then, like I said, we know that the SATA and the power and all that is actually working. But we'll see. There might be some other stuff that we got to figure out here. So this is a hard drive that I pulled out of a different computer here in the building, a computer that I know was working. So I know that this one has like a good Windows install and all that on it that should theoretically be working. And so hopefully we'll see a Windows logo over here. Perfect. Oh, but it just shut off. That's weird. Try her again. And so if we see it boot into a Windows logo, what that, like I said, means is that our power port that we're in and our SATA cable and our SATA port are all functioning on some level, on enough of a level to like get us to a normal boot with a different hard drive in. So that means that our problem is probably with our hard drive, like directly. But there's a couple other things that we'll want to make sure we're testing too. So yep, we got into a normal boot there. So like I said, that probably means the problem is with my hard drive. But there is a couple other things I want to test. I'm not going to do a real full shutdown here. So one of the things you can do sometimes with hard drives if you're having trouble with them is rather than having them be the drive that you actually boot your computer off of, sometimes you can plug it in as a secondary drive and still get access to it from your computer through Windows. So I want to try that. And what I want to do is take a second SATA cable. So this is the cable that sends information from the hard drive to the computer. Called the SATA cable, serial. I don't know what the ATA stands for. But it's the successor to a different cable called the PATA cable, which, again, I don't know what the ATA stands for. Like, I've seen it written out. You just see it written out as serial ATA, and I have no idea what the ATA stands for, actually. Are you looking that up for me? James will get right on that. So I'm going to plug this one into a different SATA port. And I'm going to give it power through this.
Stands for Serial Advanced Technology Attachment.
Serial Advanced Technology Attachment. There you go. Even I'm learning things here today. And so now I'm going to boot this. And again, what the dream would be is I boot this up, it boots into Windows off of this hard drive that we know works, and then I can go into the hard drive like partition manager thing and see it in there and like just look at it, and it's just going to work and it's going to be great. And I can hopefully save my hard drive here. So let's see. Format hard disk partitions. And it's not there. So this one at the very top, the C drive, is the gray colored one, the one that I know works, and then you can do what's called partitioning of hard drives, so you can kind of break your hard drive into smaller pieces if you want to allocate them for different stuff. So it's rare for a hard drive to just be like one big mass. Usually it's broken into a couple smaller pieces. So that's why you see a couple other things there. But there's not one for this hard drive. There should be a 128-ish gig partition in there, and that has a separate letter designation if it is actually there. But now we have more testing that we have to do, though. Because again, I don't know for sure, if it's the hard drive that's the problem. Again, maybe I'm plugged into a bad SATA port, maybe a bad SATA cable, who knows. So, we're going to try that again. And I'm just going to take my SATA out of here. And I'm just going to swap these two SATA ports, because I know SATA port 1 works, but I'm not confident SATA port 2 works. So I'm just going to swap those two. Now we're going to try again. And if this works, then that means that SATA port 2 is working fine, and that's not our problem. There's our Windows logo again. So, SATA ports aren't the problem. Could be the SATA cable yet. We don't know. Likely not. Again, like at this point, I'm 95% sure the problem is just the hard drive, but why stop at 95% when you can narrow it down to a 99% type of certainty? So now we'll test our SATA cable, and so what we're going to do is we're going to swap which one is plugged into which cable here. And so again, we have one hard drive that we know works, this one We have one hard drive that we are less sure works, the one that's in my hand right now. We have one cable that we know works, which is now plugged into the hard drive that we don't think works. We have one cable that we're not sure if it works, which is now plugged into our hard drive that we know works. And so now if it doesn't work, we can say with some level of confidence that, or we can say, hey, maybe there's a problem with our SATA cable. That's worth testing out. And there's our Windows logo. So it's not that.
So it's probably the hard drive.
We have one more thing to test though, which is that we have two separate plugs on our power cable that we have here. So it's one cable, but it has two separate ports on it. Could potentially be possible that one of the ports is bad. We haven't tried those. And so we're going to swap those. And so now our potentially bad hard drive is getting plugged into our power port that we know works. And our we know good hard drive is getting plugged into our power port that we're less confident works. And now we try it again. Wouldn't it be great if this was it?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Nope. That ain't it.
It's the hard drive.
Nope, it's the hard drive. And so, I mean, at this stage, now I'm having to probably buy a new hard drive is what this means. It's not exactly the outcome that would have been super ideal for me here, but it's not the worst outcome either. Hard drives aren't super expensive. I might try some little bit more experimenting here with a couple other things. Every once in a while I've been able to swap stuff into like a laptop and slide it in that way and have it work, or I have a like kind of double like SATA and SATA power cable that I can plug into a USB, and I've been able to get stuff to work off of that. That hasn't worked with this context, but like I said, what I can pretty confidently say at this point is that, you know, we've tried every configuration of power, of hard drive, of SATA data cable, of SATA power cable. Between these two, we've tested them all one at a time. We've tested them all across a couple different contexts here, which means, like I said, I can say with probably 99% confidence that, like, yeah, there's some sort of major issue with my hard drive here where it's either not properly getting power. Well, actually, here, let's try one more thing. So now that we know that everything else is working, there could be, potentially, some sort of like detection issue that's just a thing where it's like not showing up in Windows, but it might show up in BIOS as like a thing that's plugged into a SATA port. So let's try that. I gotta, where's my delete button? There it is.
So Ryan's spamming the delete button right now to make sure that it boots into BIOS.
Yeah, and what button you have to push might change from computer to computer. A lot of times it's F2 is the BIOS button. But basically you have to press it some point between when the motherboard boots up and when your operating system starts booting up. So if you get to the Windows logo, it's too late to do it, basically. So that's why I hit the power button and I start pressing it right away, basically. And the dream would be we see two hard drives in here.
But we do not.
And we do not. And so we see the gray one, the M4 CT, etc., 64 gigs,
And
exactly.
that's the one we knew worked.
That's the one we know works. That's the one from the 3D printer computer that I stole for this. And like I said, if this one was working, we'd be seeing a similar like M4 CT 128 would be what it probably would be called, and it'd be 128 gigs over here. So it's not even getting detected on any level, which probably means I like overcharged it and broke its power thing would be my guess.
Yeah.
Like if I were to speculate, but
Somehow that hard drive has been bricked.
yeah, it's unfortunate, but so she goes.
Yep.
But anyway, that's it. Good lesson to learn there. Good process to like be familiar with, and it's, you know, troubleshooting is something that is always handy, like knowing kind of the gist of it. Like I said, it really, really helps to kind of know what the order of operations is for the thing that you're testing. You know, right away, you know, when I pressed the power button and nothing happened, like it wouldn't have done me any good to start, you know, swapping hard drive stuff around because none of it would have worked. Like you got to know, okay, there's there's a step before any of this becomes a thing where, you know, I could push this and, like I said, the fan doesn't kick on. That probably means there's a power issue. You know, it could have been an issue with the, you know, extension cable I have over here. But in my mind, I can check that off because, like I said, the thing you're watching me on is plugged into that same power strip. So the fact that that was working was like step one in my like troubleshooting process. Then it was checking, make sure the power supply is on. And if that hadn't worked, switching the power supply on, and the next step would have been checking to make sure my connections from the power supply to the motherboard are in properly. So on and so forth until, you know, I end up at the same place, kind of thing.
Yeah, you almost kind of have to understand the direction that electricity and information moves.
Yeah, it's a river is kind of the thing. Like, doesn't do any good to check on what's going on dam number 3 before you check on what's happening on dam number 1, kind of thing. Doesn't really tell you anything. But hopefully that was interesting for you guys. Like I said, I do these computery ones every once in a great while, but it's been a hot minute since I've done one, and like I said, just kind of all came together where we had a book that kind of talked a little bit about some computery stuff, some invention-y type of stuff, and my computer at home happened to brick last night too, so.
All right.
Unfortunate for me, fortuitous for you content lovers out there. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. We do these shows, like I said, typically Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then like Sunday, sometimes Saturday as well. Like I said, today was kind of a bonus one. But if you find this type of stuff interesting, if you think that, you know, if you're into science, if you just want to support the Headwaters Science Center here in Bemidji, Minnesota, you can tune in. Or you can come visit us in person. We are open 7 days a week. We're open from 9:30 to 5 on Monday through Saturday, and then on Sundays we're open by after lunch, 1 to 5. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll probably be on tomorrow doing some more stuff with